All right, so today's presenter is Francis from the Legal Services Corporation of Delaware, which provides free civil legal advice to qualifying individuals. So on that note, I'm going to let you get started.
Hi, thank you, Caitlin. Yes, my name is Francis Gauthier, and I am an attorney at Legal Services Corporation of Delaware. We are one of 3 agencies in Delaware that provide free legal services to individuals that have low income. So each agency has like its own areas of practice, and at LSCD, which is the acronym for Legal Services Corporation of Delaware, we handle landlord-tenant cases, only representing the tenants in those actions. And we do mortgage foreclosure cases representing only the borrowers or the homeowners in those actions. And we do consumer bankruptcies representing the individuals that file for bankruptcy. We also do unemployment compensation cases, and we do general consumer issue cases. Like, for instance, if you had construction done on your house and the contractor did something wrong or didn't finish the job, we could represent you in an action against the contractor. So on the line, we also have Joe Nwetsling, who is one of the attorneys in our office, and he did a program that you can find online through the Delaware Library's YouTube channel from this very series on April 29th, and it's called Tenant Rights Private Housing. And you can watch that if you're a renter and you have and you might have some issues with your landlord that you want some legal advice about, or to just to learn a little bit more about what your rights are. And if you do have issues, you can call our office. You can call our office also for the mortgage foreclosure cases and the types of issues that we're going to discuss today. And our phone number is 302-575-0408. And you would call and speak to someone at intake, which is at extension 100. And they would help you figure out whether or not you qualify and whether or not we're the right office to handle your type of issue. So today, as you all know, we're covering mortgage foreclosures. And for anybody that's a homeowner, you know that when you buy a house, typically you don't have all the cash up front to pay for the house. You get a loan, and so when you get that loan, you sign a loan agreement, and you also sign a promissory note, and you sign a mortgage. The promissory note represents the amount of money that you borrowed and the amount that you need to pay back with interest. So it has the terms. It's usually a short document, but it's like it represents something like a check. Like when you have the original and it's presented to somebody, you can sign it over to them, and they have the right to collect that money that you owed the original person. The mortgage is a document that is signed by the borrower, where the borrower agrees that if they fall behind on their mortgage payments, the mortgage company can come and take your house. They can initiate foreclosure proceedings that results in the sheriff putting up your house for a sheriff sale. And at the end of the day, they would use the money that the buyer pays for your house at the sheriff's sale to pay off your debt to the bank. So once the house is sold, the mortgage company generally does not come back to you to try to get any more money. That like your obligation to them is satisfied by the sale of the house. So when you do have a mortgage, it's usually like a 30-year term, and there's a specific amount that you need to pay every month. Sometimes people think like, well, this month, maybe I'm not going to pay the whole thing because I want to take this vacation, or my air conditioner broke and I need the money for something else. And generally, if you fall behind like maybe 1 month but you're able to catch up quickly, you'll be okay. But if you fall behind like for 3 months in a row, the mortgage company considers that to be a default. And even if like the 4th month you're able to like restart your payments, the mortgage company will not accept them. And that is a lesson that a lot of people learn the hard way, when now the mortgage company is not accepting their payments and they fall further and further behind every month. So one of the things we advise people that find themselves in that situation is to set aside the money. Like, don't think like, well, the mortgage company doesn't want it, so I'm going to go use it for something else. Instead, you should put it in an account, because at some point the mortgage company is going to come back to you and say, okay, please pay everything that you should have paid up to now, if you want to keep your house. And sometimes if you might make a payment that's like 3 cents short or something, because you forget what the exact amount is. And if you do that, then the mortgage company puts your money in a suspense account and they're not applying it towards your mortgage. So that's, even though you made a substantial amount of the payment is not being applied, and then it's considered late. And when you make the next payment, they might take some of it. Like, let's say the next month you paid the exact amount you owe, but from the previous month you owe 3 cents. And if you don't have enough to cover this month's rent, this month's mortgage, plus the 3 cents from last month, you keep falling behind, because they will just take part of that money they'll take the 3 cents and then they'll put the other money in the suspense account. So it's a vicious cycle. And then there's late fees, and then they'll start deducting from the amount that you thought was going to your mortgage to pay themselves late fees. So it gets into a big mess. And when at some point, the mortgage company, after they stop taking your payments, they'll send you a notice of default. And the notice of default needs to be sent at least 45 days before they start any mortgage foreclosure lawsuit against you. The notice of default will tell you, like, this is the amount of money that you've fallen behind. That you have this X amount of time to pay it back. And if you don't pay it by that time, then we're going to initiate this foreclosure lawsuit against you. So if you set aside the money, like I said before, when they stop taking it, you might be able to get yourself back on track without any further problems. But if you didn't save that money, then it's likely that the foreclosure complaint will be filed, and you'll have to deal with that. In Delaware, once the mortgage foreclosure complaint is filed, each borrower is given an opportunity to participate in mediation. And this came about after the crisis of around 2008, when they had all these mortgages that were being foreclosed on and people were losing their housing. The government stepped in and said, wait a minute, let's try to fix some of this and not have so many foreclosures. So there are some trained housing counselors that are available to borrowers to help them apply for what would be it's called a loss mitigation package or a modification package. And it's like a document where you provide information about what your income is, what your expenses are, and the mortgage company tries to rework your payments so that you can catch up over an extended period. What they'll usually do is extend the term of your mortgage, and then they'll add the amount that you fell behind to the principal. So at the end of the day, the mortgage company is making more money because now you owe more interest on the money you originally borrowed. But it's great for people who have really invested in their homes and they don't want to leave it, and they're able to pay the amounts over a period of time. And you always have the option of selling before the end of your mortgage. I know I had some clients who thought like, well, I have a 30-year mortgage, I have to stay in this house for 30 years. That's not the case. You can always sell your house as long as your house is worth more than what you owe. And at the closing for the sale, the first mortgage company will get paid the money that you owe them, and then you get the rest if you have equity in your home. So in Delaware, like I said, you'd have that option to participate in mediation. And in Delaware, we're lucky that most mortgage companies only sue you in what's called in rem, like it's against your house. There's also what's called in personam, where it's against the person. So in some states, they'll sue you both for you personally and against your house. So maybe your house is worth less than what you owe. They'll sell your house, get that money, and then still come after you to try to get the rest of the money that's owed. Like there might be another 100,000 or something, and they'll keep hounding you until you get paid, until they get paid. But in Delaware, luckily, they usually just sue in rem, which means against the house. So once there's a sheriff sale, you have a clean slate. You don't owe anything more to that mortgage company. So in Delaware, like I said, there's this mediation, and it's held in Newcastle County. It's held the first and the third Wednesday of each month. In Kent County, it's held on the first Monday of each month. And in Sussex County, it's held the second Monday of each month. And usually there are several mediation schedules over one that day, like maybe 30 to 45 scheduled in that day. And so maybe you're scheduled to start at 9:30, but the mortgage company attorney that you're dealing with might have 4 others that are ahead of yours, so you have to wait a little bit. But then once you do have your own mediation, it usually lasts like maybe 8 to 15 minutes. And it's like something where you discuss the steps you're going to take to submit your application. And once it's submitted, like you might come back the following month, and you'll get an update that the mortgage company might need a few other documents. And then you'll come back the next month and they'll say, okay, the mortgage company is reviewing it. We should have a decision within 20 days or 30 days. And then finally, if you're approved, you will have a trial modification period where you are given an opportunity to pay the new loan amounts over a 3-month period while it's still in mediation, and they will see whether or not this will work out for everyone. And if it looks like it will work out, then they send you a loan modification agreement at the end of the trial period, and that becomes final, and they voluntarily dismiss the complaint without anything more beyond what happened at mediation. However, if the review of your application does not give them comfort that you'll be able to make payments under a new plan, you might be denied for a modification, but you could be approved for what is called a deed in lieu of foreclosure, where you sign over the house to the mortgage company rather than have a sheriff sale. But that usually only happens if you don't have any other liens, and they can take it free and clear, and it's an easy transaction. Another option you have, if the house is worth less than what the bank is owed, the bank wants to make sure that they get as much as they possibly can. So they'll let you sell it as long as the house is appraised. They figure out what the market value is, and the buyer is able to pay that amount. Because like I said, if they're only interested in, if they've only sued you in rem, they can only get whatever's attached to the house itself. Like if the house is not worth a lot, no, they can't make somebody pay a lot more simply because you had a commitment to pay more before that. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the COVID moratorium. Back in, I think it was in March that the governor and the president and everyone declared these the pandemic, COVID pandemic, and the state of emergency. And as a result of that, there was a COVID-19 moratorium on foreclosures and evictions, because as you know, everybody was at home, nobody was going to, I mean, a lot of people were not going to work, and all of that was to keep people protected so that the COVID-19 would not spread from person to person. And there was a risk too, like if you had to like move from your house, you know, then you'd have to find housing and go visit, you know, potential places to live, and then you'd have to hire movers, and there would be like too much interaction going on between people. So a moratorium was put in place, and everything stopped. No evictions and no foreclosures. But I guess it was around sometime in the summer or early fall, some of those restrictions were lifted a little bit. And then there were extensions to some extent. So the only COVID moratorium that exists for foreclosures right now is for government-backed mortgages. So there are conventional mortgages where the lenders are like considered private lenders, and they have the right to do whatever they want. So those people were able to start foreclosure proceedings within the last year, like after September or something of 2020. But for everybody else that has a government-backed mortgage, the moratorium is in place, but it will end in 2 weeks on June 30th. So there are people who their mortgage company maybe knows that they haven't paid anything, they haven't heard anything, but they were not able to file a new complaint during the moratorium. So you might expect, or you may expect a mortgage foreclosure complaint to be filed against you if you haven't been paying and you haven't heard from your mortgage company for a long time. Something may be coming after June 30th. The other thing is that some people asked for forbearances during the COVID pandemic, and that was an opportunity to stop making mortgage payments if you lost your job because of COVID, or you were otherwise impacted. You didn't have to pay your mortgage during that forbearance. But there are like 4 different options of what you can do for the amount of money you didn't pay. Like the time period for the forbearance was initially like 1 year, and so you could stop your payments for a full year. But most mortgage companies looked at it in 3-month increments. So they would say, okay, you have a forbearance for 3 months, and we'll check back with you when we get close to those 3 months to see if you still need to extend it. And they would keep checking back with you, and you could extend it for the full year. But then towards the end of that first year, the government also extended it again. So I think right now the most you could get a forbearance for is for 1 year and 6 months due to COVID. And what happens is that there is a partial claim option, which is a way for you to pay back the money that would have been paid during that 1.5 years. And that's only available to people who were not behind prior to, like, let's say 30 days before the pandemic emergency was declared. So if you were behind before that time as well, then you're not eligible for that partial claim. And what that partial claim is the government provides all that money upfront to your mortgage company, And then you have an obligation to repay the government at the end of your mortgage term with a balloon payment. So that would work out nicely for people who are eligible for that. But if you're not eligible for that, then there's a possibility that you would qualify for a regular loan modification. And then there's also a possibility that you might qualify for a combination of the partial claim and the loan modification. So those are things that housing counselors can help you with. Right now, oh, I see a question from Maria Clark. Let's see. Does the government charge interest on the money they pay in your place? No, they do not. So that's the beauty of that American Rescue Plan and the other things that Congress approved for this is that the government would pay that amount, and that amount would be added to the end of your loan, but there would be no interest on it. So you would just be paying that same amount that the government paid the mortgage company at the end of your mortgage. So either, usually what happens is you'll sell your house before the end of your mortgage, and part of the proceeds from the sale will go towards paying both the mortgage company and then the government. So that's the way that works. Any other questions? Okay. So during the pandemic and during this moratorium and forbearance period, Delaware did resume its mediations virtually on Zoom, like in a format just like this, in September of 2020. And initially, some people were like feeling like, whoa, I'm being rushed into mediation, and right now I don't have a job or whatever. But those people were able to ask for a forbearance within the mediation. So that put a halt on the mediation as well, so that they have time to try to get a new job or get in a better financial situation before they have to apply for a mortgage modification. And that would improve the likelihood that they would be approved for a modification and that they could move on and keep their house. Because typically the repayment period for your mortgage is 30 years. And so if they're able to re-amortize or modify the payment terms and extend it, people are generally more happy to do that than to have to give up their home. Okay, so I already talked about the deed in lieu of foreclosure and the short sale. The other thing that I wanted to mention is just that I mentioned there are several mediation sessions, like usually 3 to 4, sometimes 10, depending on who the lender is. And the setup is that there's a large room, there's a lot of borrowers that are there waiting their turn, kind of like seated like if they were in a waiting room at the DMV maybe. And then there are tables with attorneys that represent each of the mortgage companies that have foreclosure cases in Delaware. And the borrower they'll typically pick a housing counselor on their own. There are like 9 agencies in Delaware that provide housing counseling services, and each agency has at least like 2 counselors that you can choose from. Some people meet with their housing counselor before their first mediation. Other people will team up with the housing counselor at mediation. They'll meet there for the first time, and then they'll have a follow-up meeting. And generally what the attorney for the mortgage company will ask you and your housing counselor to do is to submit a mortgage modification package. and they typically give you like maybe 10 days from that first mediation to submit it. You know, your housing counselor and you can negotiate if you need a little bit more time to gather papers. And once that's submitted, the mortgage company has to let you know when the package is complete. Typically, it's not complete right away. They might need something else, like, oh, they need another bank statement or something, pay stubs from your employer to prove that you have this income that you reported. But once they tell you it's complete, the mortgage company has 30 days to make a decision on whether or not you are approved for a modification. So sometimes you'll come back to the mediation just to get these updates, and what they do is, like, at the end of one mediation, they'll give you a continuing mediation record, which we call a CMR, and that CMR will state what happened at that mediation today and what needs to happen before the next mediation. And then sometimes your housing counselor will be able to represent you at the next mediation if there's nothing really that you need to do at that one, if you're waiting on the mortgage company. And then eventually there's a final mediation record, and each of these are recorded with the docket for the Superior Court foreclosure case, so that the court knows the status of what's going on at mediation. So I see another question. Is there a website where you can see the list of housing counselors? I think that the Delaware State Housing Authority website has a list of those housing counselors, but typically whenever there is a mortgage foreclosure complaint that is mailed to you or posted on your property, it will include that list of housing counselors. And it's a list that I can also forward to you, Maria, after this call. But yes, it's a public document that is easily available. So if you go through the mediation process and you're not approved for a modification, and you're not approved for a deed in lieu of foreclosure, and you're not approved for a short sale, which is a possibility and does happen from time to time, then you have the opportunity to go back to your mortgage foreclosure proceedings and file an answer to the complaint. So typically when there's a complaint, you have like 30 days to file an answer. But in Delaware, because of this mediation, first they give you a chance to participate in mediation. And if that doesn't work out, then you can continue with the proceedings and file your answer. In your answer, you can challenge whether the claims by the mortgage company are correct. Like for some people, like I mentioned before, they had been making their payments all the time and they thought that they disagree that they're behind, but they might need to request that the mortgage company provide them with a payment history showing how the mortgage company applied their payments. So this is an opportunity for you to do that due diligence and to get that information. Another issue is, before I told you that the promissory note represents your obligation to pay that mortgage company. So a lot of times mortgage companies will start off with your loan, but they have a right, which is stated in the mortgage itself. They have a right to transfer your mortgage to a different company. So you might see that your mortgage company changes from one to another, and they don't even require you to consent to those changes, but they are required to give you notice of it. So you need to know, like, okay, now I'm not paying PNC anymore. I'm going to be paying Nation Star instead, so that your payments go to the right person. But if you're sued in a foreclosure case, you have the right to request, like, okay, let me see that you, Nation Star, actually have the promissory note that I signed when I got my mortgage. And you can request to see it, and it has to have your original signature. It can't be just a copy. So if they can't produce the original, then you have a defense, and you don't have to pay this company. But that is a rare occasion. Usually, a lot of clients think like, "Oh, I'm sure they don't have it. I'm sure they don't have it," but then they wind up producing it, and they do have it. Another issue is that when the mortgage is transferred from one mortgage company to another, the mortgage itself has to be recorded in the recorder of deeds at the county where the house is located. So if you live in Newcastle County, your mortgage needs to be recorded with the Newcastle County Recorder of Deeds. And if you live in Kent County, your mortgage needs to be recorded with the Kent County Recorder of Deeds. And if your mortgage is transferred from, let's say, PNC to Nation Star, then PNC needs to fill out an assignment of mortgage document that assigns the mortgage from itself over to Nation Star, and they need to record that with the appropriate recorder of deeds. And sometimes it gets tricky when there are several transfers. And so if there's a break in the chain of title, where, let's say, and this has actually happened, where a mortgage company assigned it to, let's say, Nation Star, but then they forgot that they assigned it to Nation Star, and then they assigned it, that's like PNC assigned it again now to WISPAS. So WISPAS sues you, but you're able to say like, no, I don't owe the money to WISPAS, because when PNC assigned it to WISPAS, it didn't have it anymore. It had already assigned it to Nation Star. So Nation Star is the right party, and you're not the right party in this case, and I don't need to pay you anything. So those are just some examples of defenses that you could have in a mortgage foreclosure case. But if you don't have defenses, like you really didn't pay and you didn't try to work with your mortgage company to modify your loan, and you're not able to put it on the market and sell it, then a sheriff's sale will be scheduled. Some people are able to pay their mortgage, like with help from family and friends sometimes, and without getting a modification, they can do what we help them do, a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. And what that enables you to do is to pay back the amount that you missed over, a certain period of time. And let's say you owe $20,000 or $10,000, you could file a bankruptcy, and that $10,000, you're able to pay that back over either a 3-year period up to a 5-year period. So it would be like either 36 payments, like that $10,000 gets divided over 36 payments, or that $10,000 gets divided over 60 payments, like 60 months of those payments. But you would have to make those payments for that $10,000, and at the same time, your mortgage company would allow you now to resume those mortgage payments that were stopped, when you missed 3 months. You could start them again, because you're making a commitment to start those payments again, and also to have the trustee overseeing your payments in the bankruptcy of that $10,000. So they feel confident, like, okay, this is like a fresh start. We have assurance that we're gonna get this $10,000 by having this official bankruptcy proceeding. So we're comfortable with letting this person stay in their house and keep making these payments. But it is a stretch for a lot of people to pay their regular mortgage and then the amount that they have to pay extra to the trustee every month. So if you're able to do that, that's fine and that's great. And our office represents you in those cases as well if you qualify for our services. And usually the application itself is a long document. Like you have like a questionnaire that has like 50 pages, and we ask you for that information about your income and your expenses and what your assets are, what everything is worth, and who you owe money to. So if you own a car, if you have a car and you have a car payment, not only do you pay that $10,000 that you owed your mortgage company through the bankruptcy, but you're also required to put into the bankruptcy plan those car payments. And sometimes that works out because there is a possibility to reduce your overall car payments to the value of the car if you've had it for more than 910 days. I mean, if you're, what is it? If the contract is older than 910 days, you might be able to reduce the car payment to the value of the car. But if you've entered into that contract within 910 days of filing bankruptcy, then you're committed to, you know, whatever the contract for your car says you owe. But for people who cannot afford to do or do not want to do that, you still might be able to file a Chapter 7, which would just maybe it would cause a cancellation of any scheduled sheriff sale, and it will result in the eventual discharge of all of your debt. But you cannot keep the house. I mean, if you do a Chapter 7, your obligation to pay that house goes away, but you still need to surrender the house. So that process usually takes 5 months, and some people might file bankruptcy knowing that eventually there will be a sheriff sale, but it gives them a little bit more time to plan. And if you don't do the bankruptcy and the sheriff sale is scheduled, you usually have at least 5 months in the house anyway, because you don't need to be out of the house the day that the sheriff sale takes place. So let's say the sale is scheduled for July 5th. On July 5th, you can stay in your house. There'll be an auction in the appropriate county where your house is, and the person that makes the highest bid has to pay 20% of whatever they bid at the sheriff's sale. And then they have 30 days before that sale is confirmed, and the buyer will need to pay the full amount that's owed at that after confirmation. And once the sale is confirmed, then that buyer has the ability to file a writ of possession in the Superior Court that would require you to turn over possession of the house to them. You know, it states like, I bought this house at a sheriff's sale, this person is living in it, and I want the house now. When they file that, there is a hearing that is scheduled. It's called a rule to show cause hearing. And you would get notice of that hearing, and you would have the opportunity to come to the hearing, which would be like another 30 days later, like, so now like 60 days out from the time of the sale. And at that hearing, you can request more time if you need it. But ideally, if you know that the sheriff's sale is going to take place, you should start like looking for a place to move to, and have that all set up. But if you don't, you know, you might be able to ask for another 30 to 45 days at the rule to show cause hearing. But then when that time is up, the the sheriff will come and like change the locks. So you have to like have your possessions out of there and be ready to start fresh somewhere else. So that's the end of my prepared remarks regarding mortgage foreclosures. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Okay, well, like I said, we are at Legal Services Corporation of Delaware, and there's someone there who can talk to you if you have any questions regarding any housing issues or any consumer law product issues. It was a pleasure to speak to you tonight, and I hope to be hearing from some of you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming out today, Francis. I really appreciate it. And I'll be sure to send everyone the YouTube video once we have it up online. And just a reminder that the series is ending next week. So our last session will be on Social Security, if anyone is interested in that. But,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.